Hey, everybody, this is Javier Valderramos. I have James Deirmendjian. Did I say it close? Was it
You
close?
got it,
Correct?
man. You
I
got it.
got it? Yeah, I was
Yeah.
working on it before we started recording. And he is a philanthropist. He is the owner and founder of Fight Fit Training. He lived in Austin and trained in Austin for a year. He is a three-time world, three-time national medalist. Now he helps he strength trains for the military, first responders. How are you doing today, James?
I'm doing great, Javier. I just got a really nice, solid workout in, so my mood is good. My focus is sharp. I'm ready for all your questions, and I'm excited for this.
You got your sway right? Everything's good and correct?
Yeah, the mind is working. Now that the body's been taken care of, the mind is working well.
So now you got everything ready. So I got a couple of questions for you. First thing is, when I went through your summary and I went through your bio, you had a special year was 2016. So 2016, apparently you looked yourself in your mirror and you decided to make a change. What was that change and what happened with it?
100%, man. Love to get into that. So in 2016, I was working part-time as a patent agent for a boutique patent law firm. I had spent quite a bit of time and energy studying up for that. I completed a sequence of about 32 units of science coursework, bioscience and chemistry and stuff. And I'd applied to the United States Patent and Trademark Office and been accepted to the patent bar exam. I, I took that test three times. It's also known as the patent registration examination. Before passing it, I passed it and I began working as a patent agent. And I was really excited about this career because it was challenging, intellectual, scientific, and I got to interface with inventors and help, advance the process of scientific discovery and invention. So it sounds all really good, but unless you have a sought after technical degree, number one, and a law degree, you end up doing about the same amount of work or the same type of work as a patent attorney. But at most patent law firms, even if you get the chance to work in that situation that I was in, you get paid about one fifth to maybe even an eighth of what's being billed out, right? So I was dealing with that and dealing with sort of part-time hours there at the law firm I was working at, and I'd gone back to school at the community college that I had like graduated from almost 20 years before, and the whole goal was to get an engineering degree and do all this stuff, and I wasn't really happy with where I was at in life, and I'd stopped doing jujitsu. I was still lifting weights and all this sort of stuff, but I gained quite a bit of weight, and I remember talking with my boss and being like, "Hey, man, like I need something better right now. I can't just go to 5 more years of school here and be stuck in the same spot because this isn't really becoming for me, and I know I can do more." And he was like, "Well, you've been in this situation for a while now. Why not just stick it out? Why not just tough it out?" Finally, it took me meeting a girl and being rejected for me to realize, like, I looked inside and I was like, dude, like you have let yourself go, right? You have stopped taking good care of yourself. You stopped with all these things that you really love. You stopped pursuing dreams and goals outside of a good career and making good
Yeah.
money down the road. Like, who have you become? You're listening to everybody else. Everyone else is telling you that you have to be this way, that way, the other way. And that's when I sort of snapped out of it. I met a guy who was a former Green Beret in 18 Delta. He was going to the same school at the time as me. We became friends and he sort of became a mentor to me. And we started working out together a little bit, talking, training, all this sort of stuff. And that's about the time when I started to lose the weight, get back into fitness. And I took a big leap of faith in buying into a marketing coaching program as I saw for that were on Facebook. And I realized that I could resurrect my old personal training business and start charging a lot more for it, making more money, having more impact, and move on to a better situation as far as my living situation, as far as my sense of my own ability to provide for myself, all that kind of stuff. And so I did all that. and I pretty much never looked back.
So it took a woman turning you down for you to change your life around.
100%,
I,
man.
I listened to everything. I was listening to everything, but it was just kind of like, leave it to a woman. Well, that woman made a hell of a mistake. She made a
Well,
mistake, man.
I mean, I think at the time she was probably doing the right thing for all parties involved. But
Yeah.
the point is, it got me back on the path of growing again and being true to who I was.
So, what were some of your key elements in your mindset that helped you make this change?
I think the biggest thing was just pain. Because when everything sort of went down the way it did, it wasn't just okay, yeah, this girl rejected me, big deal, right? It was what it represented and what it sort of brought me back to, which was I'm more concerned about what other people think than I am with what I really want, right?
Of course.
I'm more worried about doing these things that everyone else says I should because I have to do X, Y, and Z than being true to the things that I want for myself. You know, I've lost my standards for myself. I've lost my own intrinsic goals outside of just making money, outside of just fitting into someone else's mold. And that realization, that was the thing that sort of brought me back to myself ultimately.
So, like, what were the things that you did to start when it came to losing weight? Like, what was your beginning when it
Absolutely.
came to like weight loss?
I think just to sort of pain rejection at first, you know, like curb my appetite, right? There's something really
Mhm.
interesting about that. And that's happened before, you know, that's happened multiple times. Let's just put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Um, but then from that point, I started to set some goals for myself, you know. I started to say to myself, okay, like I'm about 250 pounds right now. I know that I'm much better when I'm down to like 210, 215. So what do I do to get back down there? And I started tracking on my food, right? I downloaded my Fitness Pal. I started punching in my food every day. I started to get more into cardio focused workouts as well. I started getting into running. I hired a fitness coach of my own for the first time in my life, a specialty fitness coach that trains in the same niche that I do because that was something that I wanted to get proficient in was you know taking care of people in the armed forces or in first response in law enforcement. You know, just because I had friends involved and it was always something that I wanted to be involved with. And so taking all these steps with the pain as the catalyst, that's what really got me down the path of getting back to, you know, where I was or even better.
So, what mental techniques and rituals will help you perform under stress when it comes to the high level of jiu-jitsu competition?
Sure. So this is an interesting question because there's a lot of things that that are involved in this. First of all, technique, right? If you have confidence in your technique, that's what you go back to when the temptation to panic you know can rear its head, right? You know you have the skill there in place. It's almost unconscious because you've drilled the technique so many times and you know how to respond to intelligently to whatever your opponent's doing because you've put in the work, you've put in the time on the mats. Number two would be strategy. And this is somewhere where I actually still struggle because uh, in part because I'm usually a lot stronger than most of my opponents. There are exceptions to that, but because I'm so focused on the strength and conditioning side of things, I like to go in there and submit people as quickly as possible, right? You know, especially in the tournament, it makes sense because you could have four, five, six matches in a day. So you have to conserve your energy. So it only makes sense to try and catch the sub as quickly as you can. However, that strategy doesn't always work. And so you have to be prepared to respond intelligently again, right? You have to be prepared to duke it out with your opponent to play, a sort of war of attrition with them where your focus is to actually wear them out and to not expend your own energy, right? Your
Yeah.
focus needs to be to like get on top, to put pressure on them, to make them bear your weight and to to make them really squirm because that's what's ultimately against a tougher opponent, that's the sort of necessary precursor to you actually successfully finishing a submission.
So, I mean, I wanted to ask you about now your workout routines now that you are part of the jiu-jitsu. How do
Sure.
you how do you physically work out translates into like mental toughness for you and the people you coach?
So how do the physical workouts translate into mental toughness? Is that the question?
Yes, how does it yes, sir. How does the physical workout translate into the mental toughness?
Sure. So that's a great question because I think a lot of people look at mental toughness as if it's something where you just wake up in the morning and you decide, I'm tough. And that's not really true, right? Because mental toughness, it involves taking good care of yourself. It involves keeping your promises to yourself when you don't feel like doing that. I can struggle with sleep a lot. If I have a workout scheduled and I haven't slept super well, I still go do the workout. It doesn't matter. And the irony of it is sometimes when my sleep isn't so hot for whatever reason, I hit PRs on my lifts. And if I hadn't shown up, that wouldn't have happened. You know, other things that are sort of equivalent to that. Mental toughness is it's not just being hard and being tough either. It's also okay. I'm gonna have the discipline to put myself to bed on time, so I can try and get as much sleep as I can. Right? I'm gonna have the discipline
Of course.
to eat the right food, to stay hydrated, to stretch, to do breath work or meditation to get my mind right. And so all of these things that maybe people think of as soft skills, these disciplines, being in the habit of them is what increases your mental toughness because you prove to yourself, just like with lifting, right? If you're going for a hard set with some heavy weight and you're scared of it, you prove to yourself by pushing through that you actually are stronger than these sort of fear signals and the apprehension that you're getting, leading up to the effort that you're about to make.
Yeah, because generally for myself, I like to go for a walk or like a light workout. I know I don't look like I work out, but I try to work out. And then, you take a hot shower and that kind of like that gives you the ability to get a little bit extra sleep, what I've kind of noticed.
100%.
So I want to ask you about your educational background.
Sure.
How did you get into it? Like what was your thought process of being in philosophy and so forth?
Sure. I think as a young kid, I was always this way where I liked big ideas and I liked asking questions about things,
Hmm.
right? I was just very intellectually curious.
So I'd be a pain in the ass
Of
kind of
course.
child, like why and
Yeah,
why and why.
absolutely. Um, but when I went to college, when I started, I ended up taking my first philosophy class and it just clicked with me and I realized, okay, these are the kinds of questions that really matter to me. Questions about meaning and the meaning of life and questions about purpose or a lack thereof, questions about the human experience and what human beings are, all these sorts of things, the nature of human existence, they were really interesting to me. And so I decided, upon taking it was between kinesiology or exercise physiology and philosophy. I decided to go with the philosophy route because it was more interesting to me, to be
It seems
100%
like you made the right choice on that.
honest. I mean, in retrospect, I don't know. It's I I think in terms of career development, it may not have. it may not have made a difference if I selected exercise physiology, but it may have. There's no way of knowing. Um, but that's kind of how I got into it, and it was much to the chagrin of my father, who's a lifelong entrepreneur, and he was not happy about that choice. He was just like, "How are you going to make money? They don't have
Yeah.
philosophy factories, right?
You know,
It's
those
not something
stupid
you can
children
sell."
and those, you're making a mistake, son, by doing it. It's like,
Exactly. Yeah. He's very pragmatic, but by the same token, like you said, it's allowed me studying that and taking that path has allowed me to become my own person and to offer the unique things that I have back to, my clients, the world, my friends, my family. So no regrets there.
like, how does that help you when you actually coaching?
Great
Like,
question. Great question. So my master's degree is in philosophy and psychoanalysis. So I think it helps me a lot to be aware of people's resistance, of people's excuses, of people's hangups and complexes and stuff like that.
like their fears and
All of that. All these mental obstacles, these stories we tell ourselves, these unprocessed experiences that keep us from wanting to do things that are good for us and to move forward to something better.
yeah.
Because that's what all this stuff is, this kind of resistance is. So I can be very aware of this. And then when I have that awareness and I know how to intervene with it, I can help someone to get out of their own way and to do the things that they promised themselves that they were going to do, even though they don't feel like doing it, or even though it's uncomfortable, or even though it's scary.
So, what is your training approach, if you don't mind me asking?
Not at all. So as far as like the strength and conditioning work,
Generally, since you've become a coach and trainer, and you're
mhm.
now the owner and founder of your own company.
Yeah. So I like to focus on a lot of heavy barbell movements. I do some functional type stuff, but the main driver for most of my client success is strength, right? So what I found in 20 years of doing this off and on, right? I mean, steady for the last 7 or 8 years, is you can never be too strong. And that strength gains in strength on fundamental movements, whether it's the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, the overhead press, pull-ups or rows or whatever it may be. Gaining strength in these big compound movements, it's pretty much the foundation for athleticism, explosiveness, speed, all those sorts of things, right? Even someone who wants to get better foot speed in a short sprint in a 40-yard dash, if they don't have sufficient strength, developing that power is going to be difficult. And a lot of people don't. And especially in like the professions of arms and response, right? There's a lot of soldiers I've worked with, a lot of Marines I've worked with, a lot of, cops I've worked with. And because of the arduousness of their duties and the long shifts where they often don't get, permission to train on those shifts or they don't have the time for it or whatever it is, right? They don't have time allocated.
Yeah,
Um,
because a lot of people don't understand that the work hours are, well, the dream is like 8, 10 hours, but really we work like 12, 15s. Like it's just you were there like half the day. If you ever seen firefighters, they're there for 24, 48 hours. Like it's quite grueling from time to time.
Absolutely. And what happens when you don't have some kind of an accountability mechanism or some high quality strength training program or a partner or someone who really knows what they're doing in their corner, those long shifts, those long hours, all that time where you miss sleep, where you're, in the suck, dealing with dumb shit, whatever it is, dealing
Yeah.
with whether it's inmates or a fire or, unruly perps or enemy combatants on deployment, all of that stuff takes away from your muscle mass, from your strength, from your endurance, from your stamina, and it can really wear on not just your physical but your mental well-being. And what I've found with most of my athletes, most of my clients, is that once we incorporate strength training and we give them this voluntary stressor that's controlled and dosed appropriately, the stresses of the job mean so much less. I had a guy who was a cop who out of work, and he wanted to try out for a SWAT element, like a tactical response team, and he
Yeah.
had to train up for a physical agility that was especially for that unit. And I was like, hey, like, do you feel like you could use some help or no? He's like, oh, definitely, I need some help. I was like, cool, okay, cool. So we started working, and by the time we were getting him to squat almost double his body weight down to a low depth and press his own body weight and do some pull-ups and he got faster too in his 1.5 mile, got it down, I think even close to 11 minutes or below. By the time all of that happened, even on the way to all of that happening, he'd do his training first thing in the morning before his shifts and he'd say, dude, he's like, I can't believe this, but when I train and I go on shift, I'm less reactive, right? I'm less scared of what could happen with a perp or any difficult situation. He says, my wife is telling me I'm in a better mood all the time, right? All this stuff, right? All these awesome benefits that are coming from him just paying himself first at the end of the day and exposing himself to that voluntary, controlled, measured dose of training stress that ultimately makes him more resilient, both in the short term and the long term.
I want to ask you about your leadership qualities. What does it
Sure.
mean to you when it comes to the gym and in life?
Like the idea of leadership,
I guess your idea of leadership when it comes to you at the gym, and then when it comes to you at home, you being you.
100% service. Leadership is the highest form of service. And so to me, this means paying attention to the unique needs of the people who I'm leading, because ultimately I'm serving them. I need to understand their situation. Need to understand their mentality. I need to understand their physical limitations. I need to listen to them when they tell me that something doesn't sit right with them. I need to come up with alternatives when an exercise doesn't work right or when they have an injury or when they hurt their leg and they can only do upper body work. I need to be not just the subject matter expert when it comes to taking care of their training, but I also need to be someone who really cares about them as a person and to recognize that all of this is just in service to them and their life and their overall well-being.
So I kind of wanted to ask you, I wanted to go back and remember about 2016 when you were stuck.
Mhm.
What is something that you can tell people? Like, what advice can you give them on how you feel that you were able to change your life about that?
Like pain is a path to growth, right? As morbid as
Hmm.
that sounds, right? You have to expose yourself to loss, to failure, to rejection. You have to risk it. You have to have personal courage in the face of these things. Without failure, without taking the risks, without putting yourself out there, making yourself vulnerable, the catalyst to change will never come. And this is something that is really interesting in my line of work and dealing with new prospective customers because I have people who come to me. Maybe they're diabetic. Maybe they have cardiovascular disease. Maybe they've been on Mounjaro or some other GLP-1
Yeah.
agonist for months, and it's actually caused them to lose muscle mass, right? And there's nothing that's a greater predictor of all-cause mortality than losing muscle mass. And there's nothing, we know this from the science, that's a greater predictor of, not
Yeah.
of lowered all-cause mortality than having strength and muscle tissue. Any
Well, I
situation.
remember my doctor. I remember my doctor was trying to get me to take those injections, and I told him no.
Yeah,
I told him because like it's so new, and I know it's the hot thing to do, but I was just like, can you just get me on some supplements and just a workout regime? And this was just maybe like 6 months ago.
sure.
Like I've literally gone from like 300, like 250, just on my own, just from
Oh wow.
just yeah. But I got so much more to go. I got
Sure.
like another 50 pounds to go.
Sure. That's still great progress. You
Yeah.
obviously you took a leap yourself, a leap of courage yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's working out in the morning and then going for that afternoon, or not the afternoon, but like the evening walk when I can.
There we go.
And then also like I don't party as much as like when I used to in Austin. Like when I first moved here, you got that smile. It's like it's hard. It's hard to be in Austin and it's like Sixth Street's right there,
For
Round Rock's
sure.
right there, Pflugerville, man, all kinds of things going on over there.
Yeah, happening city.
Oh, there's so much to do, and it's like everything. Like there's something to do every single day here.
Sure.
But I kind of want to get back on task, and I also wanted to ask you about when you compete.
Hmm.
You had brought up that you compete against people that are half your age.
Yeah,
What are some of the unexpected lessons that you've learned going against a 20-year-old?
absolutely. I love this question. So I have a lot of really memorable experiences of going against these younger guys. And really I didn't make the decision until I moved to Austin and I was training with under John Danaher and with the New Wave team to do this because what happened was I had taken second place at the Nogi Worlds at the Master 2 level, ages like 39 to 40 something, um, the year before while I was at Gracie Baja Northridge.
Mhm.
And I was a four-stripe blue belt, ready to be promoted to the purple belt, and they didn't promote me, even though I was the only person who placed at a world level event that year at that school out of like over 600 students. So that was really disappointing. Um, I had actually applied at the time for LAPD, and I got a notice of rejection on account of some stuff from my past that just it didn't make sense to me why they would reject me. But anyways, I was sitting there thinking to myself, okay, I'm living in Northridge. I don't have family around. Um, my friend who's my landlord effectively, he's selling his place, so I have to move. So do I want to stay here and train here, or where do I want to go? I just signed a bunch of clients. I had a bunch of money in the bank, and I was thinking to myself, okay, like I showed myself this year that I could be a a world level contender at this rank. Why not move to Austin and train with the best team in the world? And so that's why I came, right, to Austin. And it was while I was in Austin that I found out that if I wanted to, because I was a blue belt who was held back and hadn't been promoted to purple, which I probably deserved at that point, I found out that I could fight against the younger guys and add an extra layer of challenge to the equation. And I said, hey, like my whole life is dedicated to strength and conditioning, being as strong as possible, and showing guys my age that like if they take good care of themselves, you know, th- they can do a lot better than they even think. And so I said, okay, let's start fighting at the adult level. My first tournament was the IBJJF Dallas Open, fought at the adult level. My first opponent was a Texas State's trooper who was about 24, 25 at the time. Really sweet kid. Rex Surface, we still keep in touch. And he's a former Marine. And, we went at it. I didn't get the sub, but, with my years of experience, I think, and being stronger than him, it was really easy to take his back, score points on him, that sort of thing. Even though I think he did score a takedown. But I was like, okay, so that wasn't too bad. My next opponent, I was able to submit uh, with a relative ease, right? And so I took first in my bracket, sort of smaller bracket. Um, The next bracket, the open weight bracket, I went against a lot smaller guys who, granted, they were younger, but I was able to, finish the two guys like pretty quickly. I was just kind of on a roll at that point. And then finally, this is the funny part. This kid comes up to me. He's my next match. He's like, I've been watching you all day. He's by the name of Zach Shoemaker. He's a really great jiu-jitsu athlete, who's doing some pretty cool things in the sport at this point. I go, yeah. And he goes, you're like a master's two level aged guy, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, he's like, I've been watching you just burn through these young guys. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, please don't break me, sir. And I'm gonna tell you, Javier, I felt so guilty at that point. I was like, am I a bully? Like, am I
He
just
started
being
messing
mean?
with you, all punk kid. You
Yeah,
gotta
I mean,
tap
it got in
out.
my head, right? And so that match with him, I don't know exactly why or how it all went down, but he ended up beating me so badly on points, it was like laughable, right? Mounted
Yeah,
me, took my back, all this other
it
stuff.
worked. He got you.
He did. He got in my head. And
He
so
got a fast one on you.
towards the end of the fight, he's like, hey, I'm really sorry, man. I was like, don't apologize, keep fighting, like, and so we actually became friends. I'd see him at tournaments and he'd be like, hey, can you corner me? I'd be like, sure. Um, Another really fun episode of fighting with these younger guys, right? I had no clue who this kid was. This was at the Houston Open. Um, well, let me back it up. Houston Open guy was in his early 30s, late 20s, and he came in really hot, really cocky, strong, athletic guy. He took me down pretty quick, but from the takedown, I was able to sort of bounce back and catch him in this really tight belly down armbar, and he was not going to tap. Okay,
Yeah.
28 years old, didn't want to. The ref came and stopped it, to protect his arm. He was so disappointed, so hurt. And so I advanced, and I think that was the finals match. So I took gold there too, and come to find out, this guy was an active duty Army Ranger, right?
Oh wow.
And my friends told me all about it, and I was like, oh hey, I submitted an Army Ranger, like it was just kind
Just
of
like no
it's
big
kind of
deal.
funny,
Just
and so it's like one of those kind of status things that doesn't really mean that much at the end of the day because he was pretty thought was really eventful and fun. Well, okay, so we talked about the guy who was the Army Ranger. Um, the next young athlete that I fought, where it was kind of an eventful thing, it was the well, this is a fun story. So it was the Dallas Open Nogi, and I went against this young kid from Italy. He was a good jiu-jitsu fighter, but I faced him in the open class, and and this was after getting beaten by this like ultra heavyweight. Oh no, I didn't get beat by the ultra heavyweight until later. So I faced this kid and a good jiu-jitsu fighter, really solid, but we were fighting the open class. And so that's open weight. So he was like maybe about 150, 160 pounds, I would say, to my 215. And so um it wasn't that hard, for me ultimately to pin him in a scarf hold, kind of like a schoolyard headlock. And there's this arm lock where you thread their bent arm through your knee, you triangle your legs, and you put the full force of your hips into bending their arm this way. And with the size difference, it was just he had no chance. And his elbow had already been hurt. It had already been arm barred too hard in practice. So he tapped and we get up and I'm not like that excited. It's like I kind of just beat up my little brother, in many ways,
yeah,
right?
right.
And
Well,
and
they're all
so
kind of like your little brothers.
yeah, but I mean him especially, he was like 60 pounds lighter than me. And he's clapping and I'm like, "Oh wow, that's really classy." Like, and we talked about it later. We went to dinner later. Um but the next guy I fought in that open class was just like this gigantic um ultra heavyweight guy who was just I forget exactly what his background was, but I think it was like could have been D1 college football. And that, as soon as he took my back, it was pretty much over with. So and this is just kind of like this is the ups and downs of competition, especially when I think like in my case, I'm fighting people who are much younger than me, right? Even though I am strong, even though I am athletic, there's some foes that you come up against who are that much stronger, that much more athletic, especially these younger guys. And what can you do, right? So, um, but the next piece that I really think is worth talking about, I met this kid at the Houston Fall Open that year. This is in the gi as well, and I had no clue who he was, but he shook my hand. Nice to meet you, bro. And we get into the mats, and it's clear immediately that he's a really good wrestler. He double legs me, takes me down. He's passing my guard. I'm recovering. I play a very guard heavy game at this point because of training with the new wave team where that's really a staple of what they do. I recover my guard at one point and I throw up an armbar or triangle. I don't remember which, but basically I get my legs wrapped around his shoulders. And I'm so lucky that it's the gi at this point because he's fast and he's strong and athletic. But the gi just like it takes your old man strength and it amplifies it, by like up to 5 times, right? It's such a powerful tool of control, especially if you have a strong grip. So I'm climbing on this gi and I'm throwing my legs up and I'm panicked because I'm almost down by 10 points and I'm gonna lose this fight if I don't catch him. And so, but I lock in the armbar and I'll never forget this. There's people watching from the side watching the event, and this one guy's just like talking to his girlfriend or whatever. And this is all on footage. I have it filmed. And I lock in that armbar, and Gabe was his name. He just was not prepared to defend himself from it. And so I hip into it with all the force of somebody who can deadlift, 550 pounds. And it's just tap, he screams. I let go immediately. He falls. It was like the whole arena turned and was like, oh, like
You gotta.
bad. I felt terrible. He gets up and he's like, "Hey man, it's cool. It's just part of the game, but his elbow for sure popped." And I'm like, "Damn, again, like I'm impressed that like he's being such a good sport. Like all these young guys are being such a good sport about this, when I beat him." And come to find out, he was the number one ranked amateur light heavyweight MMA fighter in the United States, Mexico, and El Salvador at the time, across a number of different organizations. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So that's a feather in my cap. And we kept in touch and we talked and I was like, okay, like what can I do to make sure his arm heals up? I felt so terrible.
Sinus
But,
cast or what you're going to So I
but
did this.
oh my God, not terrible. And I think it's just one of those realities of the sport. If you're not just ready to tap at any moment. It's like, especially when there's a sense of urgency and I was losing on points, it's part of the game, right? Like you said. Um, but yeah, I mean, a couple of the guys I had some great fights with, and it's always fun. And it was always fun for me to see the look on the faces of some of these guys. Some of these younger guys, like, I catch them in like the emotional reaction that you see, it's just like, one guy I caught in a footlock, this young kid who was so fast and he was up on points in two and just bouncing all over me. And he did not see it coming. He entered my legs to try and leg lock me. And I've been playing leg locks for a really long time. So I catch his leg. I'm like, okay. And I turn it belly down. I'm twice his size and tap, 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 tap. And so I let go. The ref calls it. I look at him and he just like head in his hands, elbows on the mat. He's just like in mourning over this, like he
You
couldn't
made him feel
believe
all bad.
he was up on so many points. And so it's been fun, it's been fun to get in there and mix it up with these younger guys because they're so passionate and so energetic and it's been fun to see the way they kind of light up, whether they lose to me or whether they beat me. I've been able to forge a lot of friendships with them And I think to be a positive influence in their lives and to show them, hey, like, keep doing this, like you don't know what your potential is. You don't know how far you could go. And and I know they have a lot of respect for what I'm doing, as an older athlete who's taking it upon himself to not listen to what so many people say, which is like, hey, you could win more if you fought in your masters category, or hey, you would have been a world champion by now. And to be honest, I don't care. Um, I want to show what's possible to anybody who might buy into my service. Again, if you take care of yourself, if you do more for your exercise than just jujitsu, right? A lot of people look at jujitsu and they think, oh, I just do jujitsu, that's enough. It's not, right? If you want to actually be competitive at it, if you want to be able to deal with more athletic opponents, if you want to actually fulfill on the essence of the art, which is to use as little strength as possible, it actually behooves you to be as strong as possible, right? You know, within the limitations of, you're never going to be as strong as a powerlifter if you're training jujitsu 3 to 5 times a week, right? Because there's recovery
Definitely.
debt, right? It takes away from your capacity to be strong. But if you still dedicate yourself and you commit to strength training 2 to 3 times a week at least, you will be in the long term so much stronger, and your jujitsu is going to be that much better. So jujitsu doesn't help with being stronger per se. It doesn't help with being fitter per se. It's a big misconception. People think that like jujitsu gets you in shape. Not really, right? In the long run, it kind of just tears your body down, to be honest. But getting in shape, right? Being strong, having good cardio, dedicating your training to all of that, that will absolutely improve your capacity to perform in jiu-jitsu. And that's kind of my stunt in fighting in with the younger guys.
Yeah. So does it ever like turn into like one of these Rocky training monologues where they're just like, when you hear the speech of you can't do it, and then the music just comes in your head, and you're like, I can do it.
That's like that's a daily struggle in my head.
It's all like, well, you got paralysis, and you can't do this with your knees, but you still got the punch of power.
Yeah, I think I still got it is the byword of my life at the moment. We'll see how much longer I've still got it for. We're gonna find out.
You still got a lot more to go. You still got a lot more to go.
Thank you, brother.
So I wanted to ask you, what is something that you wanted to give advice to somebody who is actually being held back, supposedly by their age, supposedly that they think they're. What would you tell somebody like that?
So it's always just an excuse, right? I think it's not that people get old and then they lose their ability to move well in their bodies. They lose their ability to feel good in themselves. It's more like people stop moving and then they get old and they lose all those abilities, right?
Yeah,
You just accept at some point, well, a 40-year-old belongs on the couch, right? Or I'm 40 now and I have kids and I have responsibilities, so I can't spend all my time at the gym. And perhaps that's true. You can't spend all your time at the gym, but something is always better than nothing. And the extent to which you don't take good care of yourself is the same extent to which you really aren't qualified to lead your children to the best possible form of life for themselves, right? And a
exactly.
lot of a lot of dads in particular miss that because they've bought into this idea, whether it's been pushed on them or whether they came up with it in their own heads, or whether it's just a convenient excuse. They just kind of have this idea that they should be the pack mule for their family and that they don't have their own wants and needs that they should be catering to. And their role is just to protect and provide. And it's like, bro, like you are also a member of your own family. And you are responsible first and foremost to protect and provide for yourself. Because if you don't do that, you don't have the strength to give back. to the people who depend on you. And so that's a really common discussion that I have with dads to try and motivate them to see, like, hey, it starts with you taking care of your inner child, right? With you fulfilling on your dreams, you looking in the mirror and feeling proud of yourself. And then from there, your children, they're going to do what you're doing. They're not going to do what you tell them to. They're going to follow your example in life, right? Or they're going to resent you, one of the two for not being a good example, right? But if you are a good example, if you do take good care of yourself, if you do respect yourself, they're that much more likely to live lives that are along those lines
Yeah. So how often do you actually travel
to
to
compete.
events? How often do you actually travel?
In 2023, I traveled to Brazil to fight in the Brasileiros. I traveled all throughout the state of Texas, Dallas, Houston. Uh, I traveled to Oklahoma. I traveled to back to LA for the World Championship, which is coming up here at the end of this month again.
Oh, well,
Uh,
good luck. Good luck.
yeah,
You're gonna need
yeah.
it tapping all those little kids.
This will be my probably my last go at the adult worlds um, at the blue belt level. So one final chance. We'll see.
So what's the
Um,
actual like end game?
with competition,
What's the actual like end game when
to feel proud of myself and to fulfill on a dream.
and
Also to
then
grow my
huh?
business. Also to grow my business and showcase, again, what
Yeah.
a person can achieve if they really put their minds to it and challenge themselves.
So I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What does the future hold for you?
Mm. Well, I'm actively applying around for a TEDx speech that I'll be doing on jujitsu and what it can do, especially I think for young and middle-aged men in America, and how I advocate for it as an activity that fulfills on so many different purposes and needs that we have in America right now, including like the need for togetherness, the need for belonging, the need for healthy, friendly competition, and the need to have a meaningful and socially constructive outlet for our aggression, especially for men in America. Um, so that's made it to round two of a number of different venues, and it's just a matter of time, I think, before that talk gets accepted and I get up on the stage. So that's one thing, moving into the public speaking space and really getting my message out there. Um, the other thing is just continue to expand my coaching business. I've got a lot of really awesome clients right now. You know, high ranking officer in the Marine Corps. I've got a guy who's in the Secret Service at 36 or 37 now. We got him in there at the age of 36. And he smoked a lot of the younger candidates, so that was cool to see. Another vindication. I've got a lot of younger jiu-jitsu athletes, a deputy sheriff, a couple other police officers, um, soldiers, Marines, and stuff like that. So just taking care of those guys is something that I love doing, right? And watching their quality of life improve and knowing that I'm helping them protect themselves from the difficulties and the challenges that come with their work. That's super fulfilling. Um, Apart from that, I want to keep training with jujitsu and keep developing myself there. And that's about the size of it.
Well, thank you, James. Thank you for coming on. And all the links and descriptions, we're going to have it on there. So if
Great.
they want to find you, well, it's going to be very easy. We're going to sit there and direct them straight to you.
Awesome.
And hopefully, good luck on your business and good luck on Worlds.
Thanks so much.
Yes, sir. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we leave off?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say if you're thinking about it and you've been thinking about getting yourself into better shape and taking better care of yourself and feeling strong and becoming someone, taking the steps to becoming someone who you could really be proud of, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're a first responder or just an average Joe, it doesn't matter. If that's been a thought in your mind of how great that would be, but you've just been thinking about it for however long, whether it's weeks, months, or years, without any clear path forward, reach out to me, right? Reach out to me. Or if you'd rather work with somebody in person, reach out to them. Take action. Take that leap of faith. Take courage. Nothing that you dream of, nothing that you really want is ever going to happen by thinking about it. It just won't, right? And I could tell you that as
Exactly.
somebody who studied philosophy at the graduate level. All the thinking in the world is no substitute for action.
Good, good. Well, thanks, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.